what is it your spirit is calling forward that you're ignoring or pushing down or shutting away because you're afraid of it? And that's like a big piece of what the heroine's journey is about, is like, oh, we've been told all these things, and it's like all these like previous programming gets dumped on us, gets dumped on us, gets dumped on us. And then we have to fall down the rabbit hole. We have to do the descent. We have to, because otherwise we will go crazy.
Welcome, everyone, to this episode of All Things in One, Reuniting Religion with the Woman in the Wilderness. And I'm super excited today. I have my very wild, very weird, and I mean that in the most positive possible way, friend, Jaye Ann. So let me just introduce you to her for a second. Jaye Ann is an intuitive healer, astrologer, and the host of Feminine Alchemy Podcast. She helps people actually be themselves by clearing limiting beliefs, releasing stuck emotions, and rewriting energetic patterns. She has helped lots of frustrated and lonely people break free of exhaustion and step into empowerment. She lives in Virginia with a blended family of 6. And welcome, Jaye Ann.
Hi, Jocelyn. So good to be here. Thank you
Yeah.
for having me.
And as I'm reading through your bio, it's like, who couldn't use that? That's so great. Like all these things, I feel like that is exactly what everybody needs right now. And I'm sure that you understand that because you've been there clearly, right? We don't offer to help people a lot of times until we've been through it ourselves and we know how to, like, we return with this understanding from that journey that we've been through to help people. So that's actually what Jaye Ann and I are going to talk about today, is the heroes, or the heroine's journey, which often isn't totally understood. So Jaye Ann, I wanted to start off today by actually, if you don't mind, I'm just going to read this little part from my book that talks about that.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it. I'm excited.
The heroic journey and sacrifice of women in the scriptures is often overlooked because we do not understand this principle of ladies first. Joseph Campbell is famously quoted as saying, "Women don't need to make the journey. In the whole mythological journey, the woman is there. All she has to do is realize that she's the place that people are trying to get to." For those who've been endowed in LDS temples, the difference in the language for men and women at the beginning of the endowment ceremony would seem to corroborate this statement. And yet, what Campbell may not have realized is that the reason why the woman is there in the first place is because she has already made the journey.
I love that. I love that. I got so many chills. This is like the great fallacy of our lives, is we see a woman sitting there and we think she is just sitting there. There is so much going on underneath. I remember, like, before I got pregnant and then after I got pregnant, like, my perception of pregnant women was totally different, because I would see a pregnant woman, she's just like, oh, right, in this like lovely valley, and I just go, oh, what a peaceful existence. And then after I got pregnant, I was like, there is a whole other world happening in there. There's gassiness, there's bloating, there's this fight mambo going on inside you, and there's like, it is wild. It is a wild experience, and like there is no such thing as not a journey, even if a woman is just sitting there.
Right. And that's so great that you bring that up, because I've had this conversation with our mutual friend, Julie, right? And how the feminines, or rather the divine feminine, is more about this stillness and this place of beingness. But that there is so much going on. And I think that is because she has already made this journey of descent. And I don't think that anybody who objectively looks at our reality could deny the fact that just coming into this world as a woman throughout any point in history, right, in a woman's body is a descent.
Yeah.
And right. And so I feel like like that starts all the way back in the Garden of Eden. We have this incredible story or mythology, right? Or however people want to look at it, where Eve is the first to partake of the fruit.
Yeah.
She's the first to really condescend and look at things. And just so you guys know, I should probably, I mean, I kind of cater to an LDS audience here, but Jaye Ann and I have had all these amazing conversations about religion and the Book of Mormon. We've had an inordinate number of conversations about the Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith. And Jaye Ann isn't LDS.
Mm-mm.
But
Nope, never happened.
no, but we totally connect, right, on these things because there's so much common truth in all of them
Yeah.
that you and I totally relate,
Yeah.
right?
One of the biggest things about that is the fact that all the Christian religions have really similar childhood woundings. And I
Mm,
don't mean that in a mean way.
right, right.
It's just a pattern that is, it's all connected. And one of the most common spaces of wounding is in this Eve story to say, I am a girl and I'm, now like the worst because I'm connected or related to this Eve concept.
Mm.
Because Eve is like just super misunderstood. And you probably talked about this with Julie, but Eve is like,
Oh no,
and
we
everybody
didn't
else.
touch Eve. You go
No,
ahead. Yeah.
Eve, it just baffles me that people go, oh, we're just going to skip this whole sentence that she saw that the fruit was good for gaining wisdom, and we're going to skip to the part where it says that she screwed everybody up. And I don't see that as being true. I think that and nothing like crazy happened until Adam ate the fruit, and that's always been like touted as, oh, it only matters what the man does. Well, that's not true. She was integrating and he couldn't handle it. So we had the fall of man, which in my concept has always been the fall of the perception of man. Like the way that men see the world just drastically shifted. So for what Eve was doing, she was sitting there go, interesting. Okay, this is new. This is different. And he went, oh crap, everything has changed dramatically. I can see new things and it's really scary. And now we have to go through a whole that multi-thousand-year process of integrating that. And women are just along for the ride. But the whole time, like Eve was just kind of, okay, this is different. Because that's what wisdom is. Wisdom is not about knowing stuff. It's about integrating stuff. It's about bringing in information that seems to be outside of your purview, or something you didn't know was true, or something that you couldn't believe was true, and going, how can it also be true given all this other information I know to be true? Do I need to kick something out and have it be not true? Or do I need to find a common ground between these two? Is there a third truth that both of these are connected to that I'm not seeing yet? That's what wisdom is all about, is integration.
Oh, Jaye Ann, that is so perfect. I'm so glad you said that. And by the way, you're practically quoting Joseph Smith there. I'm just gonna say.
Am I?
Yeah.
I had no idea.
So Joseph Smith said that by proving contraries, the truth is made manifest.
Yes, that's just true.
Right? You got it, girl. You're so inspired. So that's actually a perfect segue because we're almost getting ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about this idea of the heroine's journey, which,
Yes.
if people aren't familiar with that, you've got Joseph Campbell, who did this research. Right? He's a mythologist, and he goes through all of these ancient mythologies, and he comes up with this pattern of this hero's journey, which is kind of funny because if you apply it to the Book of Mormon, actually, the whole Book of Mormon is the hero's journey. It totally is. So, and I actually talk about that in my book. All right. So the first step in this journey is that the ordinary world is not as it seems, which you kind of already touched on, right, in the story of Eve. But I'd like to also, and we can talk about mythology, like feel free to bring up anything, but have you had that kind of an experience in your life? You kind of mentioned with religion, sometimes there's some wounding and things like that. Like what has your experience been with waking up to maybe my reality isn't quite what I thought it was?
Yeah, probably about the time I had kids, right? That's gonna do it for a lot of people. When I had this concept, like, so I didn't grow up LDS, but I did grow up super Christian.
Mhm.
It was, we went to school at the church. We were at youth group on Friday nights. Like I was at church 6 days a week, roughly.
Yeah.
And so it's like one of those high demand religions is what they call that, right? And so by the time I had kids, I was like, okay, this is the right Christian woman thing to do. You're gonna have 6 kids, all within 1 year of each other. You're not gonna complain about anything. You're gonna breastfeed everyone, including the entire neighborhood. No one's getting any form of sugar or processed food. We're going to cook all our meals at home. I'm going to be a stay-at-home mom, but also I was a child of the 80s. So at the same time, I got this other hand going, you have to be a dominant boardroom person. You have to have a 4-year degree. You have to be, top of your class. You should probably go to medical school if you have a degree in biology. If not, like, you're probably worthless. All of these like societal things were coming in. And then I had all these like Christian idealistic concepts of what a woman is. And I kind of went, okay, I'm going to do this. I had a job. Oh, and it was 2008 and the stock market crashed and nobody can find a job. So I was working for somebody that my mom worked for, and he was paying me like nothing to live in a really expensive area, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it all sort of started crashing, right? In these times that we're seeing everything crash together, we start to have to ask ourselves, like, what is important and what is true for me?
Mm-hmm.
And where do I need to let go of these idealistic concepts that I thought were true? Mm-hmm. And when it all came crashing down, it was when I had 2 kids, 14 months apart. I was breastfeeding both of them, and my body was just exhausted. And I could not have a job because I had 2 kids under 2.
Yeah.
It's not even a thing.
Yeah, no.
So I felt worthless as a woman in the society. I felt worthless as a mom. I felt exhausted, and I just had nothing. And I was like, I don't even know what I need. I don't even know what I need. Something has to change, right? And that, for me, when we talk about the heroine's journey, that's when I fell down the rabbit hole. That's when I gave myself permission to open up to things that I previously thought were evil, bad, wrong, stupid, idealistic, right? Also, I have like a science background. I was like, it's God and it's science, but there was no mixing, right? There's nowhere where science can prove the existence of spirituality, and there's no version where we can support science through, like, there wasn't a mix. So I ended up, because I fell down this rabbit hole, and you kind of, when you do that, you have to let go of a lot of stuff. There's this shedding that happens. It's just part of the process. It's part of this experience of just letting all these things float up as you're falling down and going, I can't hold on to that anymore. I can't believe that anymore. Or maybe I just need to pause on that belief, and later I can circle back to it. But right now I can't do that. And I did that with church in college. I was just like, I can't really, like, there's something discordant for me right now. I can't quite put my finger on it, and I don't have the bandwidth to do that. And I don't think I'm old enough. I don't think I've lived enough life to really be able to do that. So I'm going to pause on church, and then I'll go. I went and I mean, I still had the ideals, like, you got to do the things. Mm-hmm. I went and I had the babies, and then I fell down the rabbit hole, and I was like, okay, it's total surrender. It's total surrender. And that's a scary place to be. It's really scary because you have to surrender. I had to surrender beliefs that I thought that was going to send me to hell, that I thought everybody was going to hate me for. My mom today still is like, are you sure that you believe this? And she's gotten very much more into like coming around to that. But it was really hard for her in the beginning because she was like, oh, you're just straight up talking to demons now, clearly.
Yep.
So I have no idea what the question was at this point. So what would you like to talk about next? No, that was my shatter moment. That was the whole moment where it was just like, goodbye. And I trust fell into the abyss. And that's honestly, when we actually trust God, that's what it looks like.
Yes, thank you. That is so true. And I totally talk about all of this in the book, which I know you haven't read yet because it hasn't been published yet. So that's totally on me. But I touch on all of that because I'm going to discuss that a bit more, so I don't want to get too much into it, but it's this idea that you grow up with this really sort of masculine form of religion, which is great. Like we need balance in all things. We need masculine, we need structure, we need things like that. But what we forget is the feminine. And the
Yes.
feminine is what ultimately leads to that fruit of the tree
Yes.
of life. It is that wisdom. And the feminine isn't about that rigidity in obedience and things like that. It's about listening to the inner voice or to the voice of God. And like you said, that requires a whole lot of trust because God starts like telling you to do things and you're like, wait a minute, but that that kind of flies in the face of everything that I thought it was supposed to be. And so yeah, I totally get that. And I think one reason why you and I relate so much, I mean, aside from the fact that we both have experiences with high demand religions, I mean, we totally
Yeah.
relate on that. And I'm still very much a part of the LDS faith because I do feel like there's this place for the bringing together of both and that we need people who are open to that. But I think we also relate because we've had this experience well before that in some ways. For
Yeah.
me, a lot of my waking up and viewing the world differently started when I was injured by medication. Like I
Mm.
was severely injured. I have this whole other channel, this whole other book, this whole other life that talks about that. But I was injured by two medications. I was injured actually by a fluoroquinolone antibiotic, which if people know about that,
Mm.
it's total got this black box warning. It causes tendons to rupture. It crosses the blood-brain barrier. And simultaneously, I was injured by some tranquilizers that I was put on. I was misdiagnosed and I'm put on Ativan or lorazepam. And so that's like those two things compete for the same receptors, which they didn't know. And so it was just this double whammy.
Wow.
I was so severely injured. And I get to this point, Jaye Ann, where like, I mean, I can't read a book, I can't watch TV, I
Yeah.
can't function in any sort of way. Like taking a shower hurts. All I can really do is lie around
Yeah.
and writhing in pain on the floor, literally
Yeah.
24/7. You can't sleep, so you don't get any relief from that, right?
Mm.
There's just like no escaping this hell.
Mm.
And I've fallen through the rabbit hole, like you said, right? I've gone down the rabbit hole. I am in hell. And I'm thinking, okay, so God is supposed to be like these warm fuzzies, right? Like that's what I always grew up
Yeah.
hearing. Like the Holy Ghost is like, and it's love and it's this, and I can't feel love. I mean, I literally physically, like that part of my nervous system is injured. So I can't feel
Yeah.
peace. I can't feel calm.
Mm.
And I'm like, so is God just like a combination of chemicals? Is
Mm.
that what we think God is? Is that what God really is? I mean, so I got to a point in my journey where I wasn't even sure there was a God.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And but here I am experiencing hell and I'm
Yeah.
thinking and I'm like stuff like that, like meds, I'm sure you've experienced this with people that you've worked with in your practice, but that opens you up to spiritual things in ways that you weren't open before. So I
Yeah.
am getting like a lot of stuff, but it's not good stuff.
Yeah.
And so I get to this point where I'm like, okay, well, I know there's a hell because I'm experiencing it. So
Right.
so if there's a hell, then there must be a God. So
Mm.
I'm gonna reach for that. Like that's my goal. And so yeah, eventually I got back to the place where I knew absolutely knew there was a God, and even more so than before. Like my testimony, my faith, all of that was way more unshakable than it was. And I was pretty gung-ho before. So that's a little bit mini version of mine, but I know that you can kind of relate to that because you've actually
Mhm.
had an experience with psychiatry as well.
Yes. So when I was probably 5 years old when first started having these feelings of like, this is really weird. Seeing the world through like eyes. Like that's what the thing was like. I was like, I still get weirded out. Like even wearing glasses, I couldn't even fathom the idea of glass because like seeing the world through these eyes, like seeing it like I couldn't just experience it all at one time. I was like very confused by this having a body thing.
Hmm.
And I was basically having an existential crisis. And my mom was like, oh, I sometimes think that. And I just like shake it off. And I get that. And I was like, okay. And I tried it. I was like, that doesn't work for me. So I just sort of like kept it under wraps until I was 12. And it was like very, very apparent for me. And I was, and we've talked about this before, I was having stomach aches too.
Mhm.
And Jocelyn has always told me, like, hey, that's a sign of a shaman. And I was like, well, now it makes a lot of sense. But I was having stomach aches. They took me to doctors, and I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. But then about the same time, I was like, man, I really am feeling like, what is this? What is this body I'm in? What is this whole thing that we're doing here? Like, why are we doing this? And I couldn't express it in any other words for people to continue the conversation on that level. It was like, I don't know, like, I don't know what's happening. Like, what is this?
Like, how does a
Uh,
12-year-old explain that? And it sounds to me like you were kind of having this spiritual awakening, like you were kind of experiencing some spiritual senses that maybe you hadn't before.
yeah, or I was more like just becoming aware that this is not from my body, right? And it's like it was this very clear visual of like, what is this looking through eyes thing? Well,
Hmm.
I'm looking through somebody's eyes. Who is this person their eyes I'm looking through? Like, this is very strange. And so the only thing she knew to do was take me to a psychiatrist, because there was, yeah, we went to church all the time, like constantly, but no one in the church was going to have that conversation. And no one in the church was going to be like, oh, you probably have some spiritual gifts. Like, that's what it's there for in my thought, in my worldview now. But even though they said they would talk about spiritual gifts, and even in the church I grew up in, speaking in tongues and dancing in the spirit and all the holy roller stuff, it was very much like, wait, this person can see things and hear things. No, that can't be possible. Um, unless it's inside this building. Like, it's got to be inside the building. It was
Oh.
just or like in
Hmm.
the sacred container of Bible study, right? Those are the only spaces those things are allowed to happen.
Hmm.
But as a day-to-day lifestyle, no one had any answers for that. So the answer was psychiatry. So the worst thing, I think, the biggest disservice that the psychiatrist did for me was, first of all, get visited by a pharmaceutical sales rep. That was the
Yeah.
first thing that happened, because the medication she put me on was brand new at the time. I had, it was called Risperdal, which is, if you know what that is, it's a powerful antipsychotic. It is not something that you just pop like a Xanax, which Xanax is not great either. But
But
they're
for a
not just
12,
handing out.
but like for a 12-year-old who's like, it's not like you were in danger or endangering others in any way,
No,
you know.
no, I was just like, this is weird, and I'm not sure what to do. And the lady goes, because I saw it, she had a clock, she had a notepad, she had the pens. She gave me 6 months of free supply because she had samples. Yeah.
Oh my
She
God.
got hit hard, and I didn't
Wow.
realize what was going on until years later. Like, why are they just giving this out? Like,
Hmm.
because they got free stuff. Yeah, it was 1998, and that is when that drug hit the market. So when I so they put me on that, and when they did the fall, and it was the very first day, and she also, the second service she did me was, I told her my experience, and she translated into her words and wrote her words down, not my
Oh.
words. She
Huh.
told my mom her words of how she described my experience and how she translated my experience, which is a huge disservice, because I said I'm looking through somebody else's eyes, and she said, oh, so it's like you're looking through a movie camera. Those are not the same thing, but I can
Hmm.
see how they're close.
Yeah.
But if movie camera face is the diagnosis enough to like validate that kind of antipsychotic, that's not what I was experiencing, because that's totally different thing. Anyways, it was, I swear to you, an act of the divine, because at the follow-up they said, so how do you feel? And I said, nothing. I feel the same. Nothing has changed.
That's
And they said,
crazy.
well, it was crazy. It's so crazy. Nothing was different.
Yeah, because
Nothing.
I deal with people like every day or every week now who have been so adversely affected by medications, right? Because what I do is help people get off of their medications who've been injured by
Yeah.
them. And to my mind, because there's like benzodiazepines and antipsychotics are I would say the two most potent besides maybe lithium or something like that. But like antipsychotics are number one. Like those things are potent, man. They block dopamine, they block the frontal lobe. I mean, they do all kinds of crazy stuff. So the fact that you didn't feel any effects from that it is a miracle. I cannot believe that.
Yes, it is. It is a miracle. That, and they go, okay, well, maybe it helps you cope.
Hmm.
And I said, I swear, it was like I could see into the future. And I was like, if you say it doesn't help you cope, you're
Mm-hmm.
going to go on medicine after medicine after medicine after medicine after medicine until they find the right thing. And it's just going to be a train of terrible. And I went, you're right. It helps me cope.
Hey everyone, thanks for being here. I just wanted to take a second and invite you to check out the links in the show notes and comments below this video to my new book, All Things in One: Reuniting Religion with the Woman in the Wilderness, where we explore questions like, does deep diving into deep doctrine mean going off the deep end and losing my faith, friends, and family? Why does the Book of Mormon mention so few women? Why do members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints believe in a Heavenly Mother yet know so little about her? And what does all this have to do with the Latter-day Zion? All Things in One: Reuniting Religion with the Woman in the Wilderness is a quest for the divine feminine that leads us through the murky terrain of time, folklore, apocryphal texts, and the words of prophets, ancient and modern, to discover how men and women can work together to gather all truth in one in Christ and be reunited with both a mother and a father in heaven. Get yourself or a loved one a copy of All Things in One: Reuniting Religion with the Woman in the Wilderness on Amazon Kindle and Audible.
And I was on that medication for 4 years
Yeah.
until they stopped returning our phone calls. And that was a whole nother thing where like that's illegal, right? You're not supposed to abandon your clients, but yeah, that happened. And they gave you, this is another part of the really frustrating thing about the healthcare system, is they gave us a script for 2 years. And so I was unsupervised on an antipsychotic for 2 years. Yeah.
That's
Until
crazy.
I ran out.
But again, that I can see the divine hand in that
Yes.
because, right? Because you're not being supervised. And so I think what you told me is like one day you just kind of, you're like, I'm done with this. I'm not doing that
Well,
anymore.
I ran out of my 2 year supply.
Oh,
And
okay.
then, you know, it took like 5 months to like get another doctor and be like, well, maybe should we get back on this stuff? And the third psychiatrist at that point was like, why were you on this? Like that's the only time anybody went, this doesn't sound right.
Mm-hmm.
And like, you've been off how long? Okay, how do you feel? Fine. Okay, we'll just stop. We're done. And then I never talked to another psychiatrist after that. It was just very odd. And I find, like, from my perspective now, like I look back at stuff like that and go, that was a specific experience that like I chose into for a reason. And I needed to do something with that. And there was something I had to learn from that. And what I really, really learned is that I don't have a psychiatric problem. I have a spiritual problem.
That is
And it's not a
incredible.
problem.
Yeah. And I want to get back to your story, but I want to bring it back for a second to this idea of the divine feminine and the descent, right? So Eve like partakes of this
Yes.
fruit. And I see this playing out in history, right? So I have this huge section in my book where I go through this descent of the divine feminine. It's all throughout the Book of Mormon. It's the pride cycle that we're always we're taught this growing up. Oh, there's this pride cycle, and they become wealthy, and then they become prideful, and they kind of apostatize. But it's like no, that when you don't see it through a feminine lens, you're missing two-thirds of what's going on there. And yes, wealth is a part of it. But as I talk about, I relate it to something called the Damascus document, where it specifically says, yeah, like the adversary is going to use wealth to lead you astray, but also it's going to be the denigration of women, and it's
Mm-hmm.
going to be the twisting of the doctrine of the temple, or you could call it the doctrine of Christ in the Book of Mormon, or the doctrine of ascension. And that the doctrine of ascension goes hand in hand with the divine feminine. Like you cannot, like they're kind of one and the same. So every time that I would say that the truth that God is putting out there into the world is twisted, it's going to go hand in hand with the treatment of women. It just is. I totally
Yeah.
like. I just that's like one of the main premises of my book is I show this. Women are the canary in the coal mine, so to speak,
Yeah.
with the divine feminine. And so it's so interesting that you and I relate with these experiences with psychiatry because that's sort of the part of this whole path of descent in Christianity that I show. So Christ, he totally is an advocate for women. I mean, he was such a feminist in a sense, and that word's probably triggering for people. And I don't mean feminist in the sense of like maybe modern sensibilities where we hate men kind of a thing. Sometimes it comes across that way. But what I mean is he totally was about this balance and equality between male and female. And then what happens is like right away in the first century, you have these church fathers that start cracking down and no, women can't be bishops and no, women can't hold positions of leadership and then we start twisting the story of Mary Magdalene and she becomes this prostitute somehow, you know, and then it keeps going and going and going till you get the witchcraft trials. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just this whole, it's just so obvious when you look at it and lay it out historically, like I do. At least I think it's obvious. I think I do a pretty good job of that in the book. And so you get to the point where you have these witchcraft trials, and you have almost the exact same thing that happens at the end of the Book of Mormon. It's crazy. And so, like, women are just being massacred, basically. And we think a lot of times, I think what we're taught in Christianity is, oh, then you have the Reformation, though, Martin Luther, and then you have this age of enlightenment, and things were so much better after that. And it's like, well, kind of like we
Yeah.
weren't burning women at the stake, but what you get is this age of materialism and rationalism. So whereas before it's like at least we did believe in some form of spirituality, now you get to the point where it's like, no, all of that's just bunk. Like that doesn't
Yeah.
even exist. We're ignoring one half of reality. And so it's literally an official diagnosis. If you hear things, if you see things, that you can't taste, touch, see, and feel, that's a diagnosable illness, as is too much
Mhm.
religiosity. There are different diagnoses for that, but like somebody who's too obsessed with God or whatever, that is a diagnosable illness that you could be medicated for, because in our rationalist, materialist point of view, that stuff doesn't exist. And of course, who are the ones who are the most heavily medicated in our day and age? Women. One
Yeah.
in four women over the age of 40, which I'm 47, one in four women over the age of 40 is prescribed a psychiatric medication. And like you didn't have horrible effects from that, which I'm super grateful for. But I
Yeah.
deal with thousands and thousands of people who are adversely affected. And those are the ones who have woken up. They've realized, oh, wait, something's going on here. And I think that the story that I'm being told about my mental illness isn't correct. I think it's the drugs, or I think, and they're going through this awakening with like this severely injured central nervous system. So, when you then like got off the medication and stuff like that, what happened then to all of this stuff that you were dealing with? Did you just kind of like shove it down? Did you try to integrate? Like, how did your mom respond after that? What happened?
Yeah, we just stopped talking about it. Yeah, we stopped talking about my feelings about the world and stuff like that. And yes, I shoved it down, and that probably had a lot to do with why I was so denying myself for years, right? So I was like 16 when I stopped taking the medication.
Hmm.
And then I had my babies when I was 23. And in that time frame, I probably was just denying who I really was until I couldn't deny it anymore because I had all this other stuff kind of explode that we talked about in the beginning.
Hmm.
But it was just that I had to give myself that permission to like not even deal with it at that point because it was well, they try to medicate me for it. They try to medicate me for this gifts that I have, and I didn't know what it was. So I'm just gonna pretend like I don't have these things.
Hmm.
And I was powerfully protected, right, during that time, energetically very protected, right? Because a lot of times when we stuff those gifts or powers down, we end up getting attacked in some way. because we're ignoring it. We're intentionally ignoring it. But I think that some part of me was like, okay, guys, I can't deal with this on a conscious level. We'll just kind of pause on any of that. And that was also probably about the time I stopped going to church because I was getting more involved in like high school stuff, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I just didn't deal with it for what is that, 8 years, 7 years or so. And then now as an adult, I'm like, 7 years isn't that long. But back then, that's like difference between a child and having a child.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's when I finally let myself be myself and fully and completely. And that's why any of the work that I do, that's my goal. That's what any of this is about, right? Like just let people be themselves. Let people have a central nervous system that functions and feels good. Let people worship into the spirituality and whatever it is that makes them feel so right, like feel so full, feel so clear. Let people just do their thing, man. Like that's all I care about. Is I'm not orienting anybody towards an external thing. It's very much like, how do you get into your own existence? What is it your spirit is calling forward that isn't you're ignoring or pushing down or shoving away because you're afraid of it? And that's like a big piece of what the heroine's journey is about, is like, oh, we've been told all these things. And it's like all these like previous programming gets dumped on us, gets dumped on us, gets dumped on us. And then we have to fall down the rabbit hole. We have to do the descent. We have to, because otherwise we will go crazy. And crazy looks like brain connections that aren't based in any kind of reality, regardless of spiritual reality or physical reality. It's just kind of two random things getting stuck together that aren't true, that don't work together.
Yeah.
Anyways.
No, and there's so many directions that we could take that, but I do the exact same thing. Like when people come to my channel, which I'm just some random chick on the internet talking about medical stuff. I mean, why should they trust
Yeah.
me, right? But they're so desperate at that
Yeah.
point. And one of the first things that I tell them is to just accept and let go. Like let go of your old life, let go of what you're trying to get back to. Like it's never going to be the same,
Yeah.
but that can be a really, really good thing.
Yeah.
And listen to your inner voice. Start listening to your body, because what got people into this troublesome place in the first place was listening to all of these external things. And again,
Mm-hmm.
I there's balance in all things. That's the masculine. I get it, right? But it's putting all your faith and all your trust in outside authorities because of their degree or because of their position, and not balancing that out. Because yeah, they have education, they have knowledge that's useful, but you have to balance that out with that internal knowing, right? With that voice or the light of Christ or the Holy Ghost or whatever you're going to call it, because at the end of the day, you're the only one who knows what's right for you, for your body, for your family, and for
Yeah.
your journey. And the problem is when other people come in and start telling you, oh no, you don't know that. And that's not okay,
Ugh.
right?
Yeah.
That's the problem. And that's where
Yeah.
you have to take that leap of faith. And my question for you is, did you have, because in the hero's journey or the heroine's journey, there's always some kind of a mentor that steps in, though, right? Even though we're talking about listening to the inner voice, there is somebody who maybe has already been there and done that. And I'm wondering, did you have any sort of guidance?
Yeah. So when I came to this realization, like, I don't know what I'm doing. I
Yeah.
have 2 kids. I'm exhausted. Like maybe I don't have it all figured out. Um, and I just like asked my body, like, I don't know what I need. And it's that moment of surrender. Almost within a couple of weeks, this chiropractor showed up in my office who did a modality that I'd never heard of, that is super rare. And she just happened to start working at the office I would go to twice a week, which I was, by the way, still had a lot of back pain, even though I was going to the chiropractor twice a week. And I was like, what is going on?
Yeah.
But she was able to directly address nutritional versus emotional versus physical versus, oh yeah, homeopathic. Like there was, so a lot of the work that I do is based on that experience that I had, along with others. But yeah, somebody showed up out of nowhere and was like, here we go. And she was just starting out and she was like, I'll work with whatever. I don't have like these preconceived notions.
Hmm.
And the coolest thing was too, that she had a sister who had been in the similar situation. And I find it to be really empowering when you can see a little bit of the road ahead, just a little bit. And I think that's why your channel is so important with getting things right with your nervous system, because it gives somebody that like potential. It's not 16 steps ahead, because that would have just made me go, she's just special.
Yeah.
But it was, she had had a baby, she had gained a bunch of weight, and like was previously like super skinny. And then she went through this process that I was then now enacting, and she had lost all this weight and she felt good in her body, and like things weren't terrible anymore. Like it was this whole thing. And I walked and I was like, imagine, I've never even seen this woman. I've never met this woman. I've never seen a picture of her, but just this story that her own sister, who was my chiropractor, would tell me about her made me inspired every day. And I was like, if she can do it, I can do it. She's a regular person and I'm a regular person.
That's so beautiful, because I think really what you're talking about is hope.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
is, I think, what was one of the most important things for me when I was going through that descent phase, was other people who had been through it coming back and saying, like, there is hope, there is a way out, it is
Yes.
possible. And in
And I think a
anything.
lot of times hope, sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but I
Sure.
really want to be clear about hope. Hope can be a double-edged sword.
Mm,
If it is too far ahead, that hope turns painful.
mm,
If it is just the next step of relief, that hope is vital. But the word hope itself can sometimes be very painful
yes.
because it feels impossible.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead. Because
Yeah, because if like you said, no, if you've got somebody who not only have they healed, but now they're having the spiritual awakening and they're exercising spiritual gifts and they're manifesting or whatever, you're like, no. I
right,
can't.
you're
Like
crazy.
that's
I
just
don't want that.
that's not
That
even
seems
where what I'm
impossible.
experiencing right now. That's not, yeah. So
Yes.
I totally get that. And you have so much wisdom in how you approach things, and I'm sure how you help people. And so the next phase in the hero's journey, so you go into this deep darkness, right? And you gain some kind of a boon. You get some sort of wisdom and something that you can bring back with you into the world. And so I'm wondering what was that for you? Like as you started to come out of that, what did you discover about yourself?
Yeah, so I was very science minded, right? And I went all the way to the point where I was like you said, maybe I'll just skip the whole God thing, because I've had too much vitamin church in my life, and I was like, I'm kind of done with that. But and so I pushed into the science. The problem with science is that every single little piece of information has to be proven in
Mhm.
multiple directions and in multiple pieces, right?
Right.
So when you're doing that, it's a lot of work to prove one little piece. And it felt like I was trying to color in an entire billboard with a pencil. And I was like, there's no way I can get to all of this in that way. And I have to start trust. I have to start trusting something. And so I would have like, I had an imagery of like, so or you think about lines of code. I have to write every line of code in the, like rewrite every line of code in the universe. Like that seems super impossible for one person to do. So why would I assume that that's the only way to prove that all of this is real? And so I would start to skip a few lines of code in my mind's eye and just sort of work with that. And then I started to learn, okay, there's you know shapes here, there's different pieces here, and I can take the science and trust and go, maybe there's spirituality.
Mm.
And I would reverse engineer spirituality from science. So I've always been very much into the quantum physics concepts, because that to me is like, yes, we have this materialism obsession. Also, the materialism that we've been focused on isn't everything, even in materialism.
Hmm.
So let's start to open the lens to the reality of, even if we're going to go with this materialistic concept, we can't just be like, oh, this is the only section that exists, because that's a lie. It's not true. There's so much more to reality that is proven. proven since the 40s, and we're just ignoring it. So anyways, that's what I came away with. It was being able to, once I started to trust in something, trust that the world will still be there if I don't reverse engineer every single line of code, then I can start to skip that. Then I can start to trust more. Then I can start to trust more. And then I went, oh, maybe I'm psychic. Okay.
Yeah, and that's a scary moment. So I talk in my book about all of this language that I show really is the divine feminine. It is spirituality, and it's all there in the Bible. It really is all of this
Yeah.
language that people look at and they're like, oh my gosh, astrology or psychic, or I don't know, what are some of the other words? I have a
Oh, even energy healing, even
yeah,
crystals, all of that stuff, that was part of the rabbit trail of like,
yes.
I'm going to fall down. I'm going to start burning sage. I was like, what am I
I
doing?
know, I
This
know.
is calling in bad things,
It's so
right?
bad, right?
It's
But
not.
when you recognize that the King James Bible was
Yes.
translated during the height of the witchcraft trial era, and right as the creeds are really starting to say, look, God like is here and is totally separate from us, and God can't give us any new revelation, and we can't connect with God, we can't have these spiritual gifts are bad. I mean, by the time Joseph Smith comes around, literally like the creeds are, if you're experiencing spiritual stuff, that's from the devil. Like there's none of that. And here he is having visions and things, right? So we have to understand how much the language was manipulated and twisted. And so a lot of the words that were like, oh, see, this Bible says this is bad. It's like, yeah, but that same word is also used in relation to Abraham or Joseph when they're doing something good. So it totally just depends on how it's literally how it's interpreted. And so when you can
Yes.
peel back those layers of fear and all of the bias, like you said, the programming, the things that we've been taught that limit us from becoming who we truly are. And some of that goes back to the original plan that I believe, right, which is that we're supposed to become like God. That's the whole
Right.
premise of the LDS faith is we lived with God, we're children of God, we're supposed to become like God. How do you do that unless you develop these gifts of godliness? And you can give it whatever language you want, whatever you're comfortable with is fine. But the point is, like, you have people like Jaye Ann out there who, I mean, she's at the age of 12 and she's like, she's already experiencing these things. And the problem is, like you said, the religion is supposed to be the gathering place where as you start to wake up and have these experiences, that's supposed to be like this place that can help kind of guide you down the path so you're not starting from scratch and figuring it all out on your own. But the problem is we don't have a language for it because so much of it
Yeah.
has been vilified.
Yeah.
I love so there's this guy named Thomas McConkie, and I think you would love some of his stuff because he left the church to become, and he basically to become a Buddhist monk. So
Mhm.
he becomes this Buddhist monk, but then he comes back and he brings all of this wisdom with him. And there's this book called well, his program's called Transformations of Faith, but I think the book is navigating a Mormon faith crisis. But what he really is talking about is as people start kind of waking up, and I see it as sort of this expanding. It's like, okay, here's the box that you're taught, and it's a good box because it gives you sort of these foundational principles to build on. But all of a sudden, you kind of have this expansion. You're like, whoa, I need to reframe things. Like and you don't have a language for it. And
Yeah.
other people who haven't experienced that, they have no idea what you're talking about. And so you become like this person who's going off the deep end, right? You become vilified because you're not staying within the parameters of the box. But anybody who looks at any scriptures, particularly the Book of Mormon, uh, will realize, wait, it's all about going off the deep end. every single journey is about going down the rabbit hole. Lehi wakes up, he's in this Jewish society, and he's like, wait a minute, the God, the Yahweh I'm being taught about is not the God that I just saw in vision. And he
Hmm.
starts building an altar and offering sacrifices, which he's not supposed to do. He doesn't have the authority to do that, so who is this guy? And he's preaching some other God named Christ that they've never heard about. And they're like, okay, let's stone him because that's what you're supposed to do. I mean, it's just so funny. And so yeah, it's like the waking up process can be so scary and perilous because not only is it like you dealing with all this, but you dealing with all the people around you,
Yeah.
right? Who
Yeah.
are like, no, that's not okay. You're not supposed to do that. Anyway, I don't know where I was going with that, so we'll bring it back to the heroine's journey here. But unless you had something to say about that.
No, it's absolutely true. Like that spiritual awakening moment is a feminine process. I talk about like um in science, there's something called negative and positive feedback loops, right? And so
Hmm.
when you have a negative feedback loop, you're trying to maintain homeostasis. When you have a positive feedback loop, you're making things to make things happen more, and it's a snowball effect.
Oh.
And the positive feedback loop is actually the feminine process because we don't do anything unless it's worth it. And once we're on the train, it's gone. We're happening. It's already happened. Birth is a positive feedback loop process.
Hmm.
Keeping your stable temperature is a negative feedback process. What the masculine is trying to do is maintain stability, maintain stability, maintain stability. The feminine is when it's time to go, we're going and
Hmm.
we're going. And enlightenment, awareness, awakening is a feminine feedback loop process. Once you've started expanding, you can't stop it. You can't make it, you can't stuff it all back in the box. And that's why people get really worried about like the whole Pandora's box thing,
Hmm.
because it's like, oh, you're going to let it all out. Well, you know what? Maybe it needs to be out of the box.
Right. Because the divine feminine, and I show this in the scriptures, right? I'm not just taking this from somewhere out in the internet sphere or something. It's right there in all the journeys of these women.
Yeah.
All these women are outside the box. They're literally outsiders, a lot of the time. I mean, you have Rahab, who's on the outside of the walls of Jericho, who's a prostitute, who makes it possible for Joshua and these guys to do what they do. And she's a progenitor of Jesus Christ. There's no condemnation there for what she's doing. You have Ruth, who that's an incredible story. You have this image of the mother with her mother-in-law, Naomi. She's listening. The mother has no posterity. She has no place for her among the children of men, right? She's an outcast. And she has Ruth go into Boaz and euphemistically like uncover his feet, right? And we oftentimes don't recognize, but like the feminine is, yeah, that's her job is to kind of like throw things off balance. And our job as women, a lot of times actually, is to make men uncomfortable. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think any man, whether he's straight or gay, can't kind of deny that, like, if a beautiful woman walks down the street, she's gonna make him a little uncomfortable. Like, we
Mm-hmm.
make men uncomfortable. And then when it comes to the idea of the descent, right? My life is an example of that. Like when I went through this descent phase, as I started coming out of it with enhanced spiritual gifts, well, I mean, I had them before, it was just I wasn't aware, right? But like I started coming out and recognizing all these spiritual gifts, and I'm really stepping into them and embracing them. And at first, my husband's like, my wife's going crazy. What like what's she talking about? And I'm interpreting the Book of Mormon totally differently than he's heard before. But as I start to heal and my family starts to see the good fruits of that process in my life, and I'm inviting them to come on this journey with me, now my husband is starting to experience things. Now he's starting to awake. And that's the beautiful thing about the feminine journey, about tipping the balance, is as you do that, now you provide this tower, like Rapunzel, you're up here, and you provide now this goal for men to get to. And they do want to get to the woman. That is always the goal, is to get to the woman. Um, so like, I'm curious, like with you, so when you started recognizing, because you are clear, like you have insane, I would say, spiritual gifts. You just, it's kind of like there's no,
Mhm.
there's no veil there for for Jaye Ann. It's just kind of all there, I feel like, with you a lot of the times.
Hmm.
How did you start bringing that back in and integrating that into your life in a healthy way, I guess?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just wanted to highlight in your story that you just described, like the way that you described it was very similar to the original conversation of Eve eating the fruit. When
Mm,
you ate the fruit, you brought in the
yes.
wisdom.
Yeah.
You shared it with your husband, you shared it with your family. That's the dream. That's the experience. And they were welcoming of it. They weren't like, oh, you're nuts, and I'm going to stick you in a home. So, so lovely. Anyways, I just wanted to like that just like came full circle. I was like, wow, that was cool.
No.
Um, how did I even start integrating my gifts? Okay, well, I will say this. It's probably like 10 years ago this weekend. That's crazy.
Ah,
Like
what?
I did do a plant medicine journey after about 3 years of doing intense personal development work and like all kinds of different modalities and like went down the rabbit trail, blah, 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 like letting go of all these limiting beliefs. I was like, I feel like I need something, whatever.
Yeah, can I just interject right there? So, plant medicine, for people who don't know that, like that's maybe if someone does ayahuasca or mushrooms or something like that. But the important thing that you said there is I had already done a lot of the work, right?
Yes.
I had already done a lot of healing and things like that because any sort of, I would say, psychedelic drug, and that can be a prescribed antidepressant, that can be a prescribed antipsychotic, like any of those things can
Mm-hmm.
do the same kind of thing. And so if people aren't already aware and mindful of their thoughts, of their emotions, and integrating things, that's when you have people who just go off the deep end in a bad way because they start
Yes.
experiencing stuff they're not ready to experience. And they don't understand. They think it's all just their own voice in their own head or whatever it is. And it can lead to a really, really bad place. Um, oh, and one more thing I just have to put in, sorry, before you go on. If
Mhm.
anybody is on psychiatric drugs, I'm not trying to vilify them and I'm not trying to shame anybody. If it's working for you, awesome. I'm happy. And also, if somebody wants to get off of a medication, please don't ever just stop a psychiatric drug.
Oh, yeah.
Ever,
Yeah.
right? Like just
Oh.
go to my channel. I've got resources. Don't ever suddenly stop a psychiatric drug because that's going to lead you to places you don't want to go. So, okay, so back to Jaye Ann.
That's important. No,
Yeah.
that's really important because I did just stop, but it wasn't doing anything in the first place. So yeah, that needs to be said.
Yeah,
Do
like
not
you
just
were the
stop.
bad example. Don't do what Jaye Ann did, please.
Don't run out and then wait 5 months for an
Yeah.
appointment.
Okay.
um, yeah, so I had done a lot of personal development work. I had done a lot of understanding stuff, and I spent 2 full years doing the Christian work of, and I don't mean like being a good Christian. I mean, tearing out the culture of Christianity versus what's
Mm,
actually in the Bible. It took me 2 years to sort of like work that out within myself because it had more to
yeah.
do with me versus like
Yeah.
the external world.
Yeah.
After that, I was like, oh, well, it could be fun to do something else, right? Like, I don't know what my next step is. It just felt like there was a blank spot. And it was just like, I don't know what to do next. And a friend of mine had they always say you don't find ayahuasca finds you. Mama Aya always finds you.
Mm,
I did not set out to go, I'm gonna do an ayahuasca ceremony, but I was listening to a podcast of a guy who was a shaman and he did them regularly. And I'm like, that's nice for him. Good job, you. Like, I don't care. Like, people can do their things. And it was like, it's not for me. I randomly was like, felt this call, and it was February of that year, so it was like 10 years ago. Oh, I need to like stop eating pork this week, and who knows how long I'm going to stop eating pork, but I need to stop eating pork. Well, 8 weeks later, I ended up at an ayahuasca ceremony. Anytime, and this is another disclaimer because I haven't run into this yet, but my teachers have. Anytime you do a psychedelic, 100% you need to be in the presence of somebody who knows what they're doing.
mhm,
Always.
mhm.
Do not just think it's going to be like pretty colors because you are creating energetic cords to places and spaces that are unseen that can take advantage of your energy, and you don't want it that to happen, that can create bigger problems. So that's my disclaimer. I did. I had, was like, I gotta have the right shaman. I gotta have the right, like, I'm not, if this is gonna happen, if I'm meant to do this, it has to be exactly right. And I had this wonderful friend who just like threw it out there. She's like, I'm doing this thing. And you want to come to it? And I was like, maybe. And, I asked all the questions and I was like terrified to do this, terrified. And I called to the point where I was like thinking about like quitting at the last second and pulling out. And I talked to the shaman directly because he was like, well, hold on. Let's have this conversation. Because sometimes you're afraid because you're going to transform. That's fair. I can respect that. And I was so grateful that he had that conversation with me. And then at the thing, he had a conversation with me. And the first night, this was wild. This was so wild for this situation. The very first night, nothing happened.
Go fig with Jaye Anne.
Nothing happened for me, but also nothing happened in the group. Like normally people are thrown up, whatever. Nothing happened. And the second night, it was a little more activity, right? But in all of it, this is one of my favorite stories. The second night, I was sitting there and I was like, I sat up and I was like, I need help, right? Because you go, I'm like traveling on the sound waves. And I'm like, I need help. Oh my gosh, can you please, somebody please help me? And so one of the helpers comes over and I was like, I just need you to touch right here. And I was like, conscious me now is like, that's a silly thing to ask for. But I was like, this has to happen. And the lady's like touching here and she's like, why do you need me to touch here? And I sit up and I go, and I see myself like sitting on this lotus flower and my hair is like done up like this. And I am like the embodiment of the goddess. And I was just like, life is so hard. Oh my gosh, life is so hard. Like nothing's going right, blah, blah, blah. But I'm just like this incredible, like I got these eye tattoos and all these bangles. It was wild. But it made me realize I am way more than I give myself credit for. And I can just integrate all of this into me and give myself permission to do ridiculous things. I can accept that. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to say something and I'm not sure. Like, so when we go through the temple, it is the hero's journey. At the beginning of a hero's journey, you start off and you're divested of all these things, right? Like you said, you peel back these layers, and that's literally what happens in the initiatory. You just take all that off, you start over again, and then you go through this whole process where you get like an endowment of godliness, of power, of things from God. And it's all symbolic, of course, right? Like the idea is you're supposed to receive it in reality, but then you get to the veil. And when you get to the veil, I have a friend who is like totally educated in everything to do with the temple, been involved with the temple and all the liturgy and stuff like that, and educating temple presence. Anyway, it's just all this. But he talks about this idea, and he's relating it to quantum physics, which I love. He's, because kind of that's what we've been touching on this whole time is this integration of spirituality and science through quantum physics, which I totally talk about in my book, this marriage of the two. But when you get to the veil, you meet God. And the experience that you had is an experience that is in other places. It's in the book of the Beloved Companion. I don't know if you've read that, but Mary goes through this ascension process, Mary Magdalene. And when she goes through the veil, the God that she meets really, it's a woman, but it's herself. And I think it would kind of blow people's minds too much, who've been through the temple to recognize that that's actually kind of who you meet on the other side of the veil. Yes, we have Jesus Christ, and yes, we have like our mother, father in heaven, and that, all of that, but you are that, and that is you. And that's kind of one of those things that's hard to wrap your mind around. But the God that you are looking for is not just the God without. There is that, but it's also the God within. It's both. And so I love that you so clearly had that experience, and you're like, this is who I am. I am the I am. And so And so why am I holding back?
Yes.
Why that was your integration process was like just waking up to I am God.
Why do I need to keep people pleasing with my whole life?
Exactly.
What is it for?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you just kind of get to that point. I mean, I'm 47. I've been through this heroine's journey multiple times. I could have,
Yes.
right? You know that. I've had multiple experiences of being broken down, going down, waking up and things like that. And you kind of just get to a point in your life where your relationship with God is so the most the how do I want to put this? It is just the center of your life. Like your relationship with God is your life. That is who you are, right? That personal relationship is what directs and guides everything. And if other things fit into that, great. If they don't, you know what? I don't give a crap anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yep,
don't I
pretty
don't give a
much.
crap. Like I care about other people more than ever because when you encounter God, God is love. And
Yes,
so you
that's
can't
it.
help but see everybody else as God. You can't help but love them and have space for them and their views and where they are in the journey. And it's like you're on that part of the journey. Good for you. I see where that is wonderful and I see the potential of that. But also, I don't really care about your opinions of where I am on the journey and like you needing me to be where you're at because that's not where I am.
Yes.
And so you can
Yes.
just kind of take that opinion and just go over in the corner and deal with it because I'm kind of
So we've talked about this before, but there's a lot of people who want to insert themselves into your still small voice, your connection with the divine. And it's because it really just comes down to a question of their own insecurity and their own desire for control. And it
Yep.
literally has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with you. And it has everything to do with the fact that all you need to do is just reconnect in with that intuitive sense and trust it. That's the biggest piece, is like being able to trust that connection with the divine as valid and just as good as anybody else's. So important.
Yeah.
It's so important.
And that's why in like right at the beginning of my book, the main thing that I address is fear. Is
Yeah.
letting go of the fear of others' fears that they try to put on you, of your fears, right? That actually create this veil that separates you from the God of love because love and fear don't coexist. So if you're
Yeah.
ever coming from a place of control or from fear, if that is the basis of anything, and we really have to take a step back and like look like where are my beliefs coming from? What are they actually based in?
Mhm.
Is it based on fear that I'm outside of a system or that I've been told things and that if I don't listen to these people that I'll get in trouble? Or is it coming from a place of love? Because you can believe the same things, you can do the same things, but from a completely different foundation. And that's going to be the difference between parting the veil and seeing God and staying stuck in that rigidity,
Yes. I love
right?
it.
Well, so Jaye Ann had to go pick up her daughter. So we stopped and we're back here. We were kind of on a roll. So we're going to pick up again with this idea of the God within and the God without, this goddess that you experienced when you went on this inner journey. Do you want to tell me a little bit of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I until that point had an issue with the term goddess, right?
Mm,
It's not a Christian word, right? Goddess implies that there's two, there's not only one God, right? And kind of like getting a sense of like a more globalized version of God, we can assume both genders exist because why else would there be two genders in biology, right? Everything reflects the spirituality. The reality reflects spirituality.
mm,
So in the oneness and in the masculine patriarchal journey that we've been focused on, God had to be a man because it's like I'm going through this hero's journey as a collective. We're going through that as a collective. So the goddess was demonized. And if you've ever heard Dave Butler speak, oh my gosh,
yeah.
find it. I had the beautiful pleasure of interviewing him, and he was showing all the stuff in the Bible, all the stuff like where the goddess was removed. And there is such a powerful importance on why goddess is also important to recognize.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about saying genderless God, it's about specifically recognizing what's been missing, what's been removed, what's been lost for thousands of years, what's been oppressed, what's been pushed down, and what's been completely like, nope, that doesn't exist. And yes, we have Mary. Well, Mary has very specific things that she's allowed to be and not be, right? It's a very, very specific worldview. There's Eve. Eve is somewhere between wonderful and terrible, right? And so there's not a lot of feminine.
No, there's not a lot of
Goddess.
room for women in Western Christianity in a lot of ways.
Yes.
Not for complete women.
No. And also like there's a warrior woman. There's a goddess that will cut you if you cross her wrong, right? Like that, it needs to be accepted and realized, because that's a big reason why a lot of women don't give themselves permission to experience anger and rage. Don't give themselves permission to stand up for themselves and struggle to hold boundaries. So I came into this like awareness of this goddess, of this awareness of the goddess within and who I was. And there was a part of me that was like, oh, I can just use this. This is not just like, oh, the end, right? There is something that I can do with this energy, with this power. And I started to play with it. And even in that state, right? That was kind of the initiation of like, oh, the awareness. And in that state, I started sort of playing with energy, and I could see the lines of code in the universe, right? I could see what quantum physics was could tell us if it could communicate, right? And that's where like we go, I'm sorry, were you high? Like, well, okay, technically yes, right? That's how that works. But it's because we expand our minds to give ourselves actual permission to connect things and play with different brain connections, being able to say, oh yeah, these have always been connected together, but what if they weren't? What if they were connected to something else? And that's when you get things like synesthesia, or where you can taste colors or smell sounds, right? And being able to do those things really opens up your consciousness and your awareness of being able to even understand more, understand there's not only one answer.
Yeah, and a lot of people have similar experiences with near-death experiences, right? They're still experiencing this form of consciousness that is way outside of the body's normal experience of consciousness, and people come back with a very different view on things. It's kind of interesting because we actually had one of the apostles who had a near-death experience that he shared last conference. And it was kind of interesting because, and then he shared it in a news press event even a little bit more. And he's very careful. He has to be really careful what he says. But basically, he's like, prayer works differently than I thought. Like I had this experience and I'm seeing all the prayers all over the world and I'm realizing, oh, that's not how I thought it worked. And that's kind of all he said. But then he gave this whole beautiful talk on prayer. And I thought, isn't that so interesting? I would love to have a deeper conversation with him on that. But so you come back with literally the archetypal gifts from the goddess. Like that is what happens in the hero's
Wow.
journey.
I never thought about that.
That,
I
yeah.
never put it in those terms.
Yeah. So you come back and the idea, of course, is now that you have these gifts is to change the world. That's what
Yeah.
the hero does when they come back. And the feminine way of changing the world can look very different. I mean, you have people like Jesus, you have people like Martin Luther King who they do have this wisdom and people don't like it. And a lot of times people don't, right? And but oftentimes the feminine way of changing the world can look more internal. It can
Yeah.
look more like that birthing process or a more subtle way of just being the woman in the tower, right? That maybe even a beacon or something like that, that just other people are just drawn to, and maybe they don't even know why. So it may be a call to engage in something like what you're doing, which is energy work. Or it may be me writing a book, but it could just be as simple as me just like engaging in sort of I guess you could call it an energy work, but there's like an internal work that you do as you encounter any sort of resistance or contention or anything that you're feeling in the world around you, and you just integrate it, you just process it with the love, right? And the light
Yes.
that you've experienced. And and I talk about this in my last chapter a bit, but it's like we've actually have now scientific evidence that when people get together, like-minded people just get together and focus on love, focus
Yeah.
all of that intention in one place, there's like measurable, quantifiable evidence that that makes a massive impact in an area.
Mhm.
Have you?
Yes, like when I forget which group it is. I think when people are going to Mecca, right, and doing
Mm,
that whole thing.
mhm.
NASA has to be aware of when they're doing that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. This
Mhm.
isn't like frou-frou stuff like, oh, I feel a disturbance in the forest. Haha. It is really demonstrable. It will mess with their stuff. And I don't know if you've ever done this, but I have demagnetized credit cards. Like this isn't just like random stuff that's happening and it's all in our head.
You
This
mean
is real.
like your energy has,
Yes.
yeah. No, it's a joke in my family with my phone and electronics.
Mm,
It's just a running joke now because I will be doing something and it is just glitching out on me. And then like
yep.
somebody else in my family will just touch it and it'll start working. And I'm like,
That
okay.
didn't do that before. Yep.
Ah, like,
Hmm.
but yeah, and it does sound so woo-woo unless you do understand the quantum science behind it, which I
Yep.
do my best to explain. I'm not a physicist, and there are just some things, that I probably got the words wrong on. But it is true. Like we're kind of at this stage now where we can literally kind of measure spiritual energy and all these
Yeah.
things where Jaye Ann, like you're saying, you see these things or you could see the code. We can measure that now. We know it's not just nonsense. Your brain waves do go outside your head. That's why we have EEGs. It's a
Yeah.
thing, right?
Hmm.
So it's kind of a really exciting time to live because I feel like there is, whereas you didn't have a language before to express these things, I see quantum science almost as this Rosetta Stone to help
Yeah.
us communicate to the world like this is what I'm experiencing. This is what's going on. I'm not crazy. It's real. So it's really cool, actually.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, I felt like we have gone through a total heroine's journey. I mean,
Gone everywhere.
we have gone down the rabbit hole multiple times in this conversation already. So
So as we kind of sort of close out, there's something that's just been like pinging in my mind that I need to say, and this is the right time to say it.
okay.
Um, all of the things, right? We started with the hero's journey, and the hero has to like physically go through this process, and the heroine's journey is more internal, and we go through the descent. Again, first of all, descent is not like we're going to hell. We're going into a scary place, right? And then we come back up out of it once we've rewired our brains, essentially, is what we're doing.
Mm,
When I spoke with Dave Butler, he said one of the most profound things that I will never forget is that the place of the divine feminine is the throne of the divine masculine, is the seat.
hmm
It is not next to each other. It is one is sitting on the other, one is deeply supporting the other. And that's why the feminine is so hard to find, is because it is background information. It is already there. It is stable and boring, and it just exists. And what the masculine has to do is go separate itself from the feminine and then return to the feminine and reverse engineer the feminine and go, oh, that was there all along.
Yeah. Because the feminine is like the subconscious, right?
Yes.
She's like gravity. It's just kind of there, but you don't notice. And you're so right. Like it's kind of funny the way the church is set up because it's set up like that. So women kind of, it's like it's like this amorphous thing. It's like, do women have the priesthood? Don't women have the priesthood? We're not sure, but so you can exercise spiritual gifts, and that's cool, and you can administer in certain things. But guys are called to the priesthood, and you go up through these ranks, kind of, you know? But at the end of the day, the idea is to become like Jesus. And what that means, what I see that meaning is, like you said, it's like, oh, so it's supposed to be an embracing of the divine feminine. It's supposed to be this transcendence, right? It's supposed to be this expansion and this ascension and the spirit of things that's so fluid, right? And so liminal. And it's both and it's yin and yang and it's everything in between. And so as men go through this rigid structure, the point is to get to, oh, kind of letting go of that. And maybe we can end with this. And it's so funny that you brought up Dave Butler a couple times because we've actually like done things together and we've crossed
Mm,
paths a lot. And I'll probably be interviewing him here soon as well. So I love that we're integrating that. But in the Book of Mormon, uh, you've got this total Asherah, this total goddess, right at the beginning in the
mm,
story of Lehi. And all these people are holding on to this iron rod. And what an insight that I had one time is we're like, oh, the iron rod, and we think of like at Disneyland and you're holding onto this railing, and you're walking along this path. It's like they didn't have that back then. It was clearly it's this branch from the tree, but it's iron, which is weird, right? Because a tree is fluid and it's living, but the rod is like this firm masculine, and we talk about that being Christ. He's the Word of God. So people are holding on to this rod, right? And they're going along this path until they get to the tree. And what we miss a lot of times is that when they get to the tree to partake of the fruit and fall down and worship, they have to let go of that iron rod. They
mm.
let go and then they partake of the waters of life. Then they partake of the fruit. And so anyway, I
Mm.
just love that you brought that up, this idea of it's almost like reverse engineering. It's like we're going back to kind of where we came from, which was Eden at the end of the day, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So fun.
Yes.
I love sharing all these things with you and all of the insights that you have too, and your journey and your experience was just so different from mine, but like kind of the same because they
We
all
got
do.
there.
It's just this pattern that everybody follows and wherever you're starting from.
This is why I think it's so ridiculous. I know we're wrapping up here, but that's why it's so ridiculous that we try to control other people's paths
Mm,
because there is no version of anybody's past that someone else could conceive of. We're being led dropwise, drop by drop by drop by the divine, even if to somebody else it looks like something that's really bad and terrifying.
yeah.
It may
And
not be.
yeah. And the thing that I found that is these patterns. That is the thing that you can kind of hold to is like, well, there is
Yeah.
sort of this journey that Joseph Campbell lays out. There is a pattern, but the way that specifically happens for each person may look very, very different, right? And
Mhm.
so the only thing any of us can do is really just try to hold space for people who are going through that and just sharing, like you and I have done today, and saying, well, this is what it looked like for me. And
Yeah.
that's not to say that's how it's going to have to look for you or that you even have to go on this journey. But if you're going insane, you might want to consider
Yes.
that it
If you
is time
can't
to,
deal,
yeah, right? That it's time to start doing to look at the world in a new way and
yeah.
consider that maybe there's some things in your life that aren't working for you anymore. And again, that's what I've done with the benzo channel that I have and stuff is like, look, like there are things in your life that clearly are falling apart. Consider that it's because you're buying into something that isn't totally true, that you need to shed and start embracing a new way of existing and going forward in this world. So, all right. Well,
Love it.
I feel like that's a good place to end. So, Jaye Ann, thank you so much for sharing your wild woman in the wilderness journey with us so openly. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
that and bringing all these things together in one with our friendship, especially. So, I'm
So great. Thank you for having me. So good to be here.
awesome. Okay, we'll talk to you later.